All right, Rabbi. When you initially get into first Force Recon, what was the name of the first team you were assigned to?
Uh, when I got there in January '67, I got originally I went into the fifth platoon, which was Killer Kane, but I didn't stay. When I went through my RIP program, I went to the first platoon, and at that point we were Groucho Marx, and stayed there with that name until roughly the 1st of February. Most of all the call signs for the company and the battalion. It seemed like a rotation of call signs. So at that point, we became two teams, countersign and dogma. And we had roughly 15 guys, one officer and one corpsman. And some of the folks that we had at that point, uh, uh, Sergeant Norman Jennings was our platoon sergeant. Lieutenant Eric Barnes was our platoon commander. And then we had uh, Sergeant Ross, Sergeant Blankenship, a couple of the radio operators were Corporal McNeamer, Finley Johnson, uh, pointmen and tail end Charlies, which most of the guys could do all the jobs. Carl Chambliss. Uh, let's see. Well, let me go back a little bit. Uh, Platoon Commander Eric Barnes, he was from New England, I think Connecticut. Norman Jennings, who knows where he's originally from? I mean, today he lives out in Laughlin, Nevada. Uh, Man that wore many hats through his career. Finley Johnson was from Philadelphia near me. Dan McNeamer was West Virginia. Carl Chambliss was out close to Memphis. Uh, Mike Pistorino is from Bronx. Ralph Mason, that was Hauppauge, Long Island. Uh, Ronnie Wallace was from Queens, New York. Uh, that's quite a few of them. Jim Hawkshurst was out of Ohio, and our corpsman Doc Ott was Wisconsin. Pretty varied. Jet Carter, Jet the Carter was from. I know he evolved into New Mexico. He might have originally been out of Texas. Frankie Cantu was Texas. Uh, and initially, those were the guys that were there when I showed up. And
Well, it's incredible to think the backgrounds of all of these different Marines from all walks of life, farms, small towns, big cities. It's pretty incredible to think about all of the sources and the experience you guys bring together.
yeah, when you think of city folk, Philadelphia, or like Mikey was from the Bronx, or a lot of guy, city guys, they don't get to hang around the woods much. That you don't think of them uh, with weapons. Well, New York City, Philadelphia, yeah, I mean they are depending on what they were doing as a kid, but uh, some of the folks, like Carter, he was a hunter. Uh, Not many of us were hunters. I grew up near the woods. There's just some wood lines like near where we lived, and we grew up playing army, playing war, and having BB gun battles and stuff like that. But A lot of us, when you hit boot camp, that's when you really learn weapons and how to fire. I mean, a lot of guys never touched a weapon, so they really didn't have bad habits yet. So it was a good bunch, a varied bunch. Probably a little more of us from the Northeast, that type of area, and smattering of the South. And then all the platoons were a little different mix. So it evolved as guys were getting short. I mean, Sergeant Jennings was fairly short, but he got wounded in January and probably didn't really run again. And Sergeant Blankenship took over. And as we got into February, March, we got some new guys. Frankie Cantu rotated, but we got Dan Bowser, who's another Pennsylvania guy. We had Pee Wee Palmer, Western Pennsylvania guy. Then we got Rocky Schmidt came, I believe, in March. Rocky was a big guy from Minnesota, and Jim Weaver was a California guy. I think he was the only guy we had out of California. But that caught us up, and we had Owen and Charles Williams. He was from Atlanta, and that was pretty much all of us. That was our core. That was our team that we split in two, and as it evolved, Captain Barnes or Lieutenant Barnes, he was selected for captain in March, and he ran until the first week of March, and then he was actually done running, but he wanted to run one more. And Sergeant Blankenship became our platoon sergeant, and Blankenship had countersign, and I ran with countersign initially, and then in about the third week of March, Barnes wanted to run one more for he was done, and Rocky Schmidt was supposed to go to mess duty, and Pee Wee had just finished, but Rocky had he had gotten an infection, so I ended up getting stuck on mess duty. The guys went out, and they were out in the Antenna Valley area, and they were going to go up from the northern side down into what we call the Antenna Valley Pass, which got very narrow, down low, and a road ran through, and then up the other side. They were going to do that for Barnes's last patrol. He knew there were a lot of bad guys out there, and they loaded up for bear, and they took a dog team with them. And when they inserted, the choppers land, they didn't touch down, but they came down on short scrub grass, which looked like just grass. But when they jumped out, it was full of rocks. And they had taken a corpsman from the battalion aid station. Our corpsman Doc Ott was doing something. He didn't go. And the fella twisted an ankle. So they, instead of medevacing them, they just took it easy and harbored for the night. And then he figured they had come to a trail. He said, if we run the trail for a couple hundred meters, we'll get off the trail, saving the guy's ankle until they had to go down the ravine, down toward the road. Well, they went on the trail, tripped the Bouncing Betty. Barnes got killed. Blankenship died the next day. Total of 5 were wounded, including the dog got some shrapnel, and it's just a disaster. But out of that, uh, have you talking to Colonel Finlayson, and who's a lieutenant with us? Then he ran Killer Kane.
Not yet.
But Barnes was, one of the closest people to Andy at that point. Andy being a newer fella, and that eventually led Andy into his revenge patrol, and you can call it the saga of Killer Kane that ran all through '67 up until about no, well, October. It changed names from Kane to Swiss Scout, but those were the fellas. And then as people dropped off, rotated, the core of us stayed pretty much together. Me, Pistorino, Dan Bowser, we probably ran 15, 20 patrols together. Rocky Schmidt ran quite a bit with us, Finley Johnson, and sometimes swap back and forth between the two different teams. But we were a pretty tight group, and I'd like to think all the platoons were fairly tight. There was no mass exodus, that kind of a thing. We didn't come in as a unit, so you had people rotating, and since we were a small unit, not too many changed at a time. We probably had our biggest change somewhere between August and mid-September. Somewhere in there was our biggest change of personnel.
Wow. Well, speaking of Pistorino and Bowser, I've got a photograph that I found of you guys in August 1967.
That's well, if you look in the front, well, it's one of the better ones. I put a caption on it. Ron Molnar down on the left, he was with the battalion and came over to us and ran with us a couple of months. He ended up running with the PRUs, and he was commissioned for a while. And he did a varied and storied short Marine career. I always remember Ron. He was about my size, but he had these three like giant purple welts on his back where he got stitched with an AK. So you got Ron and me, and Lewis was our radio guy. And in the back, that's Pistorino. In the middle, it is MB Carter. He was the second Carter we had. He was actually a rigger, parachute rigger, that took to run in the bush, ran with us several times. Dan Bowser came to us and stayed with us. And what was to be Dan's last patrol, probably about the beginning of September. He was the patrol leader. Mike was running point. I was backing point up, and Bowser was number 3. And we just passed a trail and went up a hillside, 20, 30 meters, and just made it over the hump and stopped to listen. And about 10 bad guys came and actually took a break right down on the trail that we had just passed over. And Bowser, keep quiet. We had our backs to it. So, for us to turn and initiate anything, we would have made noise. So we were sitting, and the way we were sitting, Mike would look at me, and Bowser would look, and Mike would make like with a K-bar, like come on, let's go, go get them. We can, you want to cut their throat or whatever. And Bowser's going, no, no, calm down, calm down. But that was Bowser's last one. And he still gets nervous when we talk to him about that. And it was amazing. He just he actually got called to do another patrol, and it didn't get fulfilled. I just remember the write-up was something to do with an assassination, and it never came off. And I know he was happy because he went home. And just of it was, the three of us, we stayed together, for until September when Bowser went home. But Mike and I stayed together until we both went home in January, and Hawkshurst went home in January. Pee Wee would have went home in January, but he extended and stayed with the company till mid '68. So, we had a lot of fine folk, say in those the first 6, 7 months of '67. And we still don't know why, but in the mid to third week of July, uh, Hawkshurst had to go to he moved down to Killer King, and we didn't know why, but uh, he went down there, became platoon sergeant and the second team leader for Andy Finlayson. But he'd always come back to see us because we're more fun. But, that's our story. Yeah, people wise was good, and some of us, probably because there was no internet, that kind of a thing. A couple people, we stayed in touch. Mike and I got together once we were both home and out. It turned out that me, Hawk, and Mike were all at Second Recon in Onslow Beach at Camp Lejeune in '68 for a little while. But with the advent of computers and all that, I found quite a few of the guys, and sadly, half of them are gone. So we got to spend some time on the phone. Some of us got to meet. Some of us, we talk regular. I talked to Pistorino, Hawkshurst, Bowser, regular. Pee Wee I talked to regular. But Jephthah Carter, MB Carter, Masonette, Finley P. Johnson, Carl Chambliss, Ed Uncle was a rigger that ran with us most of the year. All them are gone. Eddie Holton that came to us about August, he's gone. There's a long list, and a lot from the effects of Agent Orange, that the gifts that keep on giving. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, through that too, with the guys that you do have left, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, reunions are still held pretty regularly with first Force Recon guys, right?
First Force, not so much. I mean, a lot of them they joined the Force Recon Association. A lot of guys from my second tour, we met, for like 20 odd years separately at the beach in North Carolina. And the third Force guys, are pretty regular, and hopefully I'll get to that next month. And that's the NOM guys. and different ones, you know, different years may get together, on their own uh, platoons. I mean, Andy, when he came out with Killer Kane, I want to say there were about 12 guys that met in North Carolina that were all, Andy's team guys. And I've had, a handful that could make it here. And at a different time, uh, Mike was in the area and Bowser lived in Knoxville, so he drove 3 hours to come down. But it's a tight group. It's amazing how when you can talk to somebody on the telephone and their voice, it's the same. The voice is the same. Uh, so, and you got that bonding. You're tight.
Well, and when some of you guys do 15, 20, and 25 missions together, that's a bond that can't be broken. I mean, that's a bond that lasts till the last one of you's left.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you run that much, and I mean, there's some of the guys that ran 6 or 7 with us uh, that are pretty close. The way it evolved, the way the people evolved, the ones that we were together uh, from like when I got there, January of '67. Several got there in December and a few earlier, but from then until roughly August, those of us that were together in that period, I want to say we're the tightest and the closest. As people were rotating home and we got newer fellas in, uh, not bad guys, but just they were new guys, and the evolution had to take place. And you weren't as tight, probably not as trusting to where mentally you could go about things and Mike knew I would be thinking something and he could do something and I would be reacting already. And you had to learn and get that with the newer folk. But and they all became good recon men.
Well, speaking of the men in itself and the missions, when you go out on a patrol, how do you go about bringing the equipment? What do you bring? How do you set up the patrol? Are you walking point? Do you have a dedicated point man, or is that a rotation?
Uh, Typically, within our platoon, we had 2 teams, and we probably had out of say 15 guys, 6 or 7 that had experience running point, but primarily once we settled in, and I want to say it was in February, uh, we honed in on Mike running point, I ran backup point. So the two of us were always together. And like when Mike went to jump school in April, I ran point, but we also had a couple guys that could run point. Uh, same for guys that could run tail end Charlie. I they're different skill sets. I running point. I mean your peripheral visions, uh, your your knowledge, your observation of the bush, of the ground. Uh, you do look up, but a lot of what a point is doing is down lower, and I would be a little broader and looking up. and sometimes the bush is, I don't want to say sparse, but more open. So it's not as hard on a point, and we would distance ourselves a little more and spread. And other times it is so thick, uh, you had to rotate because it just wear you out. I mean, you might not even make 40 meters in an hour. I mean, it was really thick. Some of it you had to crawl through. The running point was stressful, strenuous. I mean, just going to bush was stressful, but and then you flip flop, and now you're at say you're running tail end, and the tail end, he's got to watch for bad guys sneaking up on you. He's got to watch mask and try and cover the trail as best can be, and do a lot of backwards movement and careful, that he's not trip and fall and then the guy in front of him is typically uh, secondary radio man, and he's got to be aware that the man on the back end is twisting, turning, and keeping an eye on him, and everybody's got to be peeping to make sure that you don't want to lose sight, and to where the guy gets actually lost and don't know which way you went. Uh, but in the order of march, you had a point, a backup point. The team leader would be third, and fourth would be your primary radio man. Fifth would be could be the corpsman, or it could be uh, guy carrying M79, and typically you ran about 8 guys. We ran five, and up in Dong Ha they ran four, which is pretty tiny. I mean, you better not run into a whole lot. But when you're running 5 guys, you may not run with a backup point. It may be, the point, the patrol leader, the radio man. If you had a corpsman, because we only have one corpsman per platoon, depending who was doing what. I think I might need a corpsman more than you do, but a lot of times, Doc Ott, I want to say he ran mostly with our other team, but he ran with us several times. But if we thought we needed a corpsman and Doc was with the other team, we could get somebody from the battalion aid station. But normally we just had somebody designated carrying a unit one, carrying a med bag. And we all carried a little pouch with a dressing, battle dressing, and maybe some penicillin or tetracycline, and some band-aids and stuff like that. But everybody had a little knowledge. But yeah, it's one of them things. Somebody might take your organ out with a K-bar, but he can't put it back in. So, so you learned all the jobs, and through 67, I ran point, backup, mostly backup point, but I ran point, and I carried the M79 early, and later my second tour I did it all. I mean, I ran a lot of back end, was assistant team leader, and I did everything but actually hump a radio, which that didn't hurt my feelings.
I can't blame you on that. Now, When you ran point, I've always been curious for Force Recon guys. Did you run your M16 or even an M14, depending on the time, on semi or fully automatic if you were on point?
Semi. I rarely ever put it to fully automatic. Uh, Typically wanted to, well, you never knew when you would walk into something. And like one, uh, Mikey parted the bush. So, well, he was right-handed. So as he's parting left-handed, there's a bad guy. So it's like pop, pop, pop. I mean, you're doing a 2 or 3 round pop, pop, rather than an automatic. And with a 14, uh, if I tried running automatic, once I hit about 3 rounds, it's running on me, and it's that powerful. And you need to be pretty stout. You want to try and fire that thing fully automatic, and keep it that way. It's one thing to fire 3 round bursts, you know. Uh, 16s, I mean, you could fire that on automatic pretty easy. I mean, you could do it one-handed, but accuracy, uh, depending how you got hit, you know, trying to get fire superiority. I mean, all of a sudden you got the whole team, if they're able to, have a line of fire, and everybody pops off 1, 2, 3 magazines, fully automatic. Uh, Bad guys didn't like to run into that kind of stuff. They knew we didn't travel in big numbers, but we did pack firepower, and we did have a stoner light machine gun, which Mike carried quite a bit up until around June. I carried a few, sometimes, but that thing was devastating running point. If you're running point and you hit something, it made a difference of night and day, and it was light enough. And but it depended on situations with whether or not you wanted to fire automatic, and not very often did you just blow out a whole magazine automatic. You may do that to try and get their heads down so you can take off, or get their head down to throw grenades. But typically you're just short burst type stuff.
Well, and through that too, with the contact that would be initiated, and of course, being that you carried the M79, for some of that close range encounters, would you ever carry any shotgun shells or flechette rounds?
I always had flechette. I always carried flechette rounds, and if you knew you were going to get into real close, you could have flechette. At night, that's what I loaded it with. So at night I'd have flechette, but if you got into trouble, you'd like to have your HE round to put a big impact on their mindset, especially if they're coming back at you at RPGs and stuff like that crap. So
Well, and speaking of nighttime too, I'm curious, when out in the bush, how would you set up a night ambush in itself in any anticipation for movement on a trail?
night ambush, I'd say extremely rare. Because once we were doing, you know, ending the day, you hit your night chow, and dusk is approaching. All right. So you found an area, and you did your nighttime prep, you ate, you hit the hit, what if you had to take a leak, and then you might move 20, 30, 40, 50 meters, not too far, but into the thickest stuff you could, maybe even on the slope of a hill. We braced ourselves on trees and you set up in a 360. That's typically trying to go to your harbor site. So once darkness is hitting, if the bad guys are watching you and they see where you are, as darkness hit, you moved over here. And more than one time, while we were sitting over here, you could see the silhouettes where the little sneaky devils would be, sneaking in through, and they can't find you and they don't know what the hell happened because they knew that you were there. And at that point, we got claymores out, and depending on how close they want to get to us, uh, we're just sitting waiting to give them a wake up call. But to do night ambushes, very, very, I don't recall in particular along a trail setting up a night ambush type thing. I I'd climb trees 80, 90, 100 foot tall during the night, and took a starlight scope, check the valley. You can see, is there movement and stuff. Uh, and you can call in Artie if you got it, or you can try and get, Puff out there or something like that. But no, you didn't typically want to be moving around at night because you don't know what's around you. And, bad guys follow trails. And, we were always trying to be careful that we didn't harbor near a trail because, trails show up anywhere. You didn't know where they all were. We found them as we went. Sometimes we knew where they were. And that's where a lot of guys got in trouble because we would get in a fight, we run through the jungle, and the bad guys are running. They're doing an end run on a trail, and then they know where the trails are going, and they can intersect you. Uh, so that happened more than one time to a lot of different folks, where you end up fighting the same people again, and you're the little pricks. How'd they get ahead of me? But it's because of the trail networks, and that's one of the things we were always trying to document: the trail networks and what moves on the trails. What kind of signs do you see?
Well, what kind of signs would you look for trail movement?
Uh, on a trail, and first thing you look at, is it clean? Uh, if it's got leaves all over it and stuff, it's saying, it's not used very often or not recently. But you see trails that are hard packed dirt. Looks like somebody swept it to keep it clean. So somebody's using it very regular. And at times you may see a little groove. And one of the things they would do is they would ungodly amounts of uh, could be rice or gear or whatever on a bicycle, and they're not riding the bicycle, but they're walking with this monster pack on this thing. So they're walking, and they're creating this little bicycle tire ditch over here. Uh, you'll see some of that. Yeah, and you're always looking. Uh, are there any booby traps? Right? They have trail markings to let them, they're the bad guys' friendlies, to let each other know that there's booby traps. Could be whatever kind of sign. I mean, they had different stuff, or directionals. I mean, they might put rocks, they might not put notches in trees. Uh, Anything that they may know, uh, like we use our hand signals. and they make trail markings. And I wouldn't doubt that they blow themselves up once in a while, but we would see the stuff. I I was going through some records again, and one of the patrols, we came up to a trail, and we didn't go on it, and it was a high-speed trail, clean as a whistle. And as we were looking, and we followed it parallel, about maybe 100 meters, found like 16 booby traps in the 100 meters. And
Would it be tripwires or would it just be even anything covered up in leaves, like a landmine, grenades, anything like that?
all the things.
Wow.
You trip wires. I mean, you can see the glint in the wire, or uh, the pressure detonated ones with a little burial under a little bit of ground. Uh, so I'll put some leaves on it, but yeah, that kind of stuff looks odd when you have a clean trail. And I was running point one time. We were going down a stream bed, and sometimes it's unreal that they'll do booby traps out. It seems like it's in the middle of nowhere, but we were going down a stream bed, and I stopped, and it, there was a Malayan whip to the side. And if I'd have kept going, I'm not sure what would have tripped it, because I think there was a wire uh, that I would have tripped in the water if I'd have kept going. And we got away, got out, and I found the line and tripped it and popped it. But uh, I went, you look and you see this stuff, and fortunate that you find it before it found you. I mean, they'll set up deadfalls because they know, we go through the bush. They might set up a deadfall with, 60, 80-foot tree, however they do this stuff. And they'll have something that'll trip and let it fall. Uh, Very ingenious. They don't stop. They keep coming up with stuff. So,
Well, it's incredible to think about the communication. I mean, I've never analyzed communication on the trail with markings, notches in trees. I mean, kind of brilliant to think about the signs that you could leave for this trail is booby trapped 100 meters ahead. Just utterly fascinating the tactics of the NVA.
yeah, I mean, as they evolved, they also had uh, communication lines. I mean, they had every so often we would find comm wire. So and you know they were some type of headquarters to a different unit, and I mean you could cut it, but they find the cut to fix it. But there were some guys that actually could tap them, and they just continue on. They just didn't have uh, the technology we had, but they had the ingenuity of fighting for 40 years in a guerrilla type atmosphere in the jungle, that kind of thing.
Well, speaking of the ingenuity, how often would the recon teams encounter any trail watchers?
And early, I say early in my tour, there weren't as many. Uh, but then as they understood that more and more recon teams were coming into their backyard, they started having more. And one could watch a fairly big area as to seeing helicopters come and go. Sometimes they didn't know, did they, somebody insert or did somebody extract? And if they saw choppers come in, uh, bad guys were dispatched to that area to see coming or going, that kind of a thing. Uh, a mixed blessing type of thing was LZ prep. Uh, one thing thinking about uh, an airstrike or artillery uh, hitting the insert zone would shake up anybody that's hiding there waiting on. The other part is it tips them off that uh, somebody's coming, something's going on there, and a lot of times it started fires. Uh, Mixed blessing. Uh, I don't know if I had in the first time we spoke. Uh, Near the beginning of January, there was a patrol, and whoever, for whatever reason, prepped the zone the night before. All right. So instead of a short period before the insert, this was done the night before. So the bad guys had from that point all through the night into the morning of the next day to check the area and to set up any bad, booby traps, which which they did. They had a 250-pound bomb that it was that didn't detonate, and they rigged that up. And Jennings Jennings said he thought he tripped it, and it was like he heard a 50 caliber round pop. He thought he heard that go, so he must somehow he tripped it. The 50 caliber round went off, and it set off the 250-pound bomb, and five guys got hurt, and the one guy got he had a big hole in him from about his Adam's apple to down into his sternum, and he ended up getting medevaced, and Doc Ott, cool, calm, was on the far side. We don't know if there's any, is there any more booby traps? Nobody know, you know, guys were scurrying to the perimeter to set up security, and came in two helicopters, in two 46s. So they were in the first 46, and the second one came in, and they dispersed. But Doc Ott was on the far side, and just real calm and quickly came across the LZ, whether it was booby trapped or not, and got to him and started doing his first aid and morphine syringe and doing everything docs do. And McNeamer was on, getting the helicopters right back. And the whole thing was 8 minutes. In and out, five guys hurt, 8 minutes. They're back going to morning chow back at Camp Reasoner, going back. So, a few minutes on the ground, it was devastating, and people are pissed off, because why was it prepped the night before? And one of them things, and we thought the guy is gone, and about a month later, got word he'd gone to Japan and then made it back to the States, and it took him quite a while, but he overcame, and everybody was all right. The others were somewhat minor, and yeah, prepping LZs, inserts were always crazy. I mean, going in, you don't know who's sitting there, who's not sitting there, and we got shot out more than one time. That's for sure. It's like a Keystone Cops. You fly in, start running out the back end. People start shooting. You run back in. Come on, get out. And like good little recon, man. If you know, the crew chiefs and the pilots and the crew chief in particular, if they have windows in their helicopter, they're relatively new. Yeah, don't knock out my windows. Yeah, well, okay. Somebody starts shooting. First thing you do is windows are gone, so we can shoot. So good, like good little recon. Then we're firing through all the holes. But yeah, went through a few of those. But inserts are always you always work in a pucker factor because you don't know. And as the smarter the bad guys got, if they were even smarter, they would wait 5, 10 minutes till the helicopters left, and now we're on the ground. Now, if they wanted to attack you, they got some grace period before the gunships could come back, that kind of a thing. And sometimes they waited, but they didn't have a lot of patience. And most of the time, we lucked out. I was trying to find the exact date, and I got it somewhere. We were getting inserted onto Charlie Ridge, which Charlie Ridge was a haven for bad guys, and bad things always happen. Well, we landed, and Mike and I was always the first two off. So we were off, and the way that we landed was kind of sloped. So we got out off the tailgate and went right around the side of the chopper, and the crew chief popped off 50 caliber, and just like that, the 46 took off. Well, nobody else got out of the helicopter, and me and Mike didn't get back on it. So everybody was flying away. Me and Mike we're on Charlie Ridge, and we quick ran up to the bush line, the wood line, and neither one of us had a radio. So now we're going, where'd they go? Why did they go? And Mike looked at me and goes, I'll watch the LZ and watch for the helicopters to come back. And you watch the bush. Okay. You want me to watch all Charlie Ridge? Yeah. Okay. I'll cover your ass. I'll take Charlie Ridge and you watch the LZ. So now I laugh about that one, but it might have been 10 or 15 minutes and they had come back, but I bet it seemed like 2 hours. I mean, because it got deathly quiet. You get the point. If you got tinnitus, your ears are ringing. But if the chopper's left, your hearing's coming back, but you don't hear nothing. It's deathly quiet. And I'm going, if no birds are, if nobody, nothing's making a sound, something bad's going on somewhere around. But fortunately, everything they come back and landed. The rest of the guys got out. We went on our merry way, and just another one of them things where when you get back to the rear is when you really cogitate and think about this kind of stuff. And,
Well, when you guys get back to the rear after these missions, how do you process? Is it a period of having a couple of beers? Is it relaxing, getting some hot chow? How do you decompress?
First thing when we get back, you go through your debriefing, and you walk through and everybody, what everybody saw, and what happened if you had any sightings, contacts, that kind of stuff. You go back, stow your gear, and depending if it's well, what time it is, I may clean my rifle, clean weapons right away. Uh, is it chow time where if you don't go then, you're not getting nothing to eat. You eat more sea rats at night again. So you may just go stink up the place and go to chow hall. Uh, and sometimes they'll hold it for you. But typically you come back, stow your gear, your weapons, and take showers. And depending how hairy it was, you may just sit down and just uh, some guys drank beer. Some of us didn't drink much beer. I mean, we did, and warm beer. But thanks to Freedom Hill PX, we got a little fridge, so you could get cold beer. We were fortunate. When you came back to the rear, I mean, you came back to something. It's not like you were stuck out of damn wild at a combat base or some shit. And you could calm down and think about what occurred. Is there anything that we did this really well, or we can improve on this, uh, and between us, one, you think about it, and then you're talking about it. Like Mike and I, we were always together, and we were across from each other in the hooch, so we're always communicate when and a, and it's like okay, and music. I was big into music. Always, first thing is music's on. Well, everybody got their music on. And Patsy Cline and the southern stuff is over here, and the soul is over here. I got some rock and roll music, and some people are just sitting there. They can't hear. They're hearing all three of these things. And, people are all, where's my mail? Okay, that's always a first, and they were good about that. The mail be on your rack, and there was a club at Reasoner, which you know guys from the battalion or force, and they had I guess you'd call it an amphitheater, a little outdoor stage where they could show a movie. Well, once in a while it was a real movie, and other times I recall four different TV shows. Like Man from Uncle, I think was one. I think Combat was one. Uh, I forget the other ones right now, but it's like, okay, so you come back and you go up, well, shit, one of these again, or it's a lousy movie. So you go and you just spent 20 minutes there, and you got into your own routine. Each of the guys did a little something different, but you got cleaned up, felt better. I mean, typically you're tired, and you might drink a beer, you drink a soda. Uh, I can't in the early up until one particular guy showed up. Most of the guys, weren't big on fire water. I remember one guy, and I don't remember what platoon he was in. They just called him Chief, and this guy, he would get whacked all the time. And then when we were in the rear, we had to stand formation and stuff. And he'd come out, he'd have one boot on, one shower shoe. The gunny'd look at him like, "You sorry sucker," and it was, it was kind of comical, but he was pretty well short, ready to go home, and didn't really give a rip. But we would, you know, I listened to music. Sometimes I wrote a little, not a lot, and we would just, talk, talk about what happened. And since we had two teams, uh, whether or not our sister team would be in, and if they were in, I mean, now we had a good conversation. What we're doing, what they're doing, and the next day, you had off. I want to say you had off, but you cleaned all your gear. You got all your web gear, and you topped up. I always topped off my water. It could sit there warm; it didn't matter. I mean, I topped my water off. Uh, then I had empty magazines, and always had, and we all pretty much did. We all had another 20, 30 magazines that we would swap out after every patrol. You would take the ones you had, take them out, swap them with another set, and you'd rotate them. You would strip the bullets and release the pressure on the springs, and and then reload the spare sets later. But you did all that stuff. You got everything ready. If you had you know wet pack stuff in your pack that was wet, uh, clean all that out. But then the next day, we basically would go to Freedom Hill. We could go down there. They had the big PX. They had the Red Cross with the donut dollies. There were some of them there. But in '67, they were building a movie theater there. They had doing a bowling alley. I mean, they had a liquor store. I forget what they call it, but you had to have your little card and a ration card. That's what it was. You could only get so much stuff, and us us low life Marines, we couldn't get real whiskey. We had to get other people to buy the shit for us. But we, so we would wind down there. You could go get cheeseburgers. Mike, he was thrilled with cheeseburgers, but we would always go down and get cheeseburgers, and they had a beer garden. So you could go down there and you could tell the office pogues versus any grunts that, were fortunate enough to get there. We would do that. And Dog Patch was right there. Uh, we would take 6 buys and we would go over to China Beach. Uh, we would, take rubber boats over there and practice rubber boat training. And we actually we stole metal beds with actual mattresses out of China Beach.
How'd you do that, Rabbi?
Well, we took a 6 by. We had this big truck, and you got a handful of guys. It don't take long to pop a mattress and take a couple of bed frames apart, sling them in a truck, and you're bouncing down the road. The gate car. What the hell was that? And it's like, after that they kept a better eye. We did that a couple of times. Uh, we were fortunate to go to what was called Gunfighter Village, and that was Air Force Club, and we would go there, and we would come in, and to us it was fancy. I mean, I had tablecloth, and you could go in there and and drink mixed drinks and uh, not a maitre d, but whoever was like in charge of the club. You guys can come in here, but you don't wreck our club. Okay, so we would, we'd go there fairly frequent, and they had this monster music room where you could make tapes. They had all these record albums. You could do, and it was great. You'd go in there and make music and take it with you, and actually go over like you're in some high class joint. So those were kind of highlights, for when we came back and help you wind down. Uh, Depending on what rank you were, we had to do some guard duty. We had some posts and some bunkers that we shared with the battalion. So it took like one or two of us and a couple, three or four battalion guys. All right. And we would do that. So while you're in the rear, the gunny would, you're at formation and it's like, I need 6 for working parties and I need this many for guard duty tonight and all that. Yeah, oh Christ. Okay. And but I bet I was only there within the first 2 weeks, and I had to go on guard duty. And I went on to this bunker that was the way the compound was it was on a hillside, and then you went down a slope to where the LZ was, and there were paddies out there. We had a bunker, and I had to go out to that bunker, and I was out there, I think, with four guys from the battalion. So I didn't know anybody, and I go out there, and I'm going, I'm I'm freaking Nick the new guy, and my eyes are kind of big, and I said, okay, I said, one of the guys was in charge of the place. He says, just go lay down, we'll take care of this. I said, okay, what do I got to do? Don't worry about it. Just go take a nap, go sleep. Oh, I'm later. I can't sleep. I'm wondering what the hell goes on out here. And I start hearing, these guys jabber a little bit, and I start getting nosy. I'm peeking now. Now I'm looking, and I see something out in the paddies come. And I'm going, what's that? Don't worry about it. Go ahead and lay down. Well, eventually, this thing I saw turns out to be this Vietnamese woman coming to the bunker, and as I eventually learned, uh, this was Hatchet Face, and Hatchet Face would come out there, and next thing I knew, there was this big line of people coming down out of the battalion. So they were all coming to see Hatchet Face, and you know, throughout '67, I remember Hatchet. I never forget Hatchet Face, and years and years later, uh, when computers and chats and all that started, I got in one for First Recon Battalion, and there were a couple of guys that I knew in the battalion. And one night there was a bunch of them on there, and I said, were any of you guys there in '67? Did you ever know Hatchet Face? And I thought I could hear the laughter through this computer because it was just a chat line. You couldn't hear nothing, and all these guys were laughing. And ever since then, every so often, if I go to something with the battalion, I say, yeah. I said, your mama son Hatchet Face. And somebody Actually, somebody got pissed off because I said that. It's like, but a guy on my second tour, uh, I said something to him, and he heard the rumors about Hatchet Face, and I heard he was. I told him, I said, I heard you were going out with Hatchet Face's daughter. He said, oh, just humor. Humor amongst the guys. So uh, that's the kind of stuff, when you're in the rear, and then you had to go do, diving. Diving was part of it. We had to do that. And then I don't know if I told you we trained PRUs uh, in the early part of the year, in February, March, April. Uh, you would get them in groups of 18 out of different provinces, and you would teach them some recon techniques. And a lot of it, we ran them and PT'd them to death and through the mud holes. But and then ended up taking them on a patrol, which it wasn't our fancy. It's one thing to take one. I remember taking three, and they weren't crack unit guys at that point. Eventually PRUs became pretty decent, and I know some of our guys actually went, and Andy did. He was a I don't know, a company commander of PRUs, that kind of thing. But the evolution did okay. But we trained them, and we also were taking Army Special Forces, and not tons of them, but quite a few. And we'd take them. They were, learning technique. Uh, I would say sharing also. And I didn't know if they were all, like out of Fifth Special Forces, I think was in that area there, but uh, they were still early in the period of Rangers doing recon and becoming LERPs, the LERP guys. Uh, I always thought a bunch of them that we worked with were LERPs, going toward LERP. But we did that, and I think I'd have to check and see how long. But throughout the year, I think we still had some.
Wow.
Uh,
Well, I
it was
mean,
varied.
through all that too, I mean, the characters that you interact with within Force Recon, the PRUs, and the trainings, I mean, we're talking a wide array of personalities that you come into contact with. And then, of course, stealing beds and the shenanigans that you guys get into. I mean, it's incredible that nobody got arrested and that, we're still here to have this conversation today.
Yes, it's amazing. I mean, for the most part, guys were not doing terrible things, but I we didn't think it was that terrible to steal a mattress, a bed, and a mattress. I mean, share the wealth.
I'm into
Uh,
that.
uh, but uh, see no evil, hear no evil. Uh, nobody told on us. Uh, you talked to Doc Norton.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if he ever told you about a fellow Ruben Alvarez. Ruben, he's I'm not sure if he actually swiped a Jeep or it was Third Force's Jeep, but he did swipe a pallet full of beer, and he was actually dragging this thing behind him or something with the Jeep, and probably Doc would be good to tell the story because I only know pieces of it, and Alex Lee, had to run interference, and where did the beer come from? Whose beer? And but Reuben didn't get in any trouble. He got out of it. But it was another great story about pilfering things.
Just a recon Marine being resourceful.
Yeah, and all the companies and the battalions, yeah, everybody had scroungers. I mean, there were guys. I mean, and they were lifers, like staff sergeants or gunny that were, you know, they were knee deep into scrounging and trading. I mean, we could, you could trade a captured AK for good stuff. I mean, I think Gunny Webb traded a pistol or an AK for like 200 steaks to
Wow.
to some uh, Air Force compound, that kind of stuff. I mean, lots and lots of deals.
I know
Uh,
so I know Marines wouldn't complain about a steak.
yeah, I mean, and we would get steaks, but it's always good to have an influx and your own party and you occasional on the beach and uh, whatever.
Well, Rabbi, it brings up a good question for the last question I want to ask you. I don't want to keep you too long tonight because it's late for this segment, and I truly can't wait for more of these. It's fascinating. But you mentioned C-rations earlier, and I've always been curious. What was your favorite and most hated C-ration?
The most hated ham and mothers. I swear that I would never eat them. I won't eat them. And I always said, you eat them, you're gonna get hit by lightning. And a fellow he passed away earlier uh, October last year, not long ago. Oh, Walter Lockett. And Walter ate. He ate ham and limas. Lightning hit. He was laying on a damn claymore wire. It 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 jumped him 3 4 feet up in the air and kind of stunned him for quite some time. And I used to give him shit about that all the time, but I just wouldn't eat him. Some guys love them, but out of the heavies, I the pork and beans, beans and weenies. That was a good one. The best overall thing was peaches and pound cake. Putting those two together, but it you know the C-rations. Certain ones I like the beans and weenies. Then we started getting what they call long rats, and they were in a plastic bag thing. There were, I don't know, four, five, six of them: chili con carne, spaghettis, beef and rice, chicken rice. But it was, in the rear you could heat water. All right, take some C4, nuke the water, put it in the bag. Good stuff. It was actually uh, you got to like some of this stuff, and you always had red hot sauce and stuff. All right, but you didn't cook nothing in the bush. You didn't heat nothing, and those things. What I would do there is I would open them and do the water, wrap them back up, and strip of rigger's tape, and that way I didn't have to use water that I was carrying. I was already carrying it with the water in it, and not like fresh heated water, but uh, it was fulfilling, and that could last me all day, one meal, that kind of thing. I mean,
Wow.
in the morning, I'd eat a can of fruit, and I got to where I didn't, I might eat one heavy, or I might have one of those every other day. I got to where I didn't carry a lot of food. I carried lots of bullets, hand grenades, stuff to blow you up, shoot you, and drink to toast to you.
Yeah.
So
Well, you have to. I mean, especially considering the missions you're running, you need every extra bullet or grenade you can have.
yeah, and depending on what time of year it is. I one time, uh, February, still monsoon. We go to get inserted, got the shit shot out of us, scurry on home. We sit on the LZ for the next 4 days. Choppers aren't available. Bad weather, no choppers. And they finally cancel the stuff. Uh, that's kind of a good thing. So there, I might take a little extra food or a little, water. I'm not too worried about. I can get rainwater. But we didn't, we were fortunate we didn't get in because we wouldn't have got, we'd have been stuck out there due to weather and the helicopters. So another time we're out there and then for, day 4 and day 5, you're going, well, uh, you're hungover. You're hungover. 3 days later, you're eating a antacid out of your med kit. That's your chow.
Wow.
Uh, and you're soaking wet for a week and you're freezing. Oh yeah, I got medevac twice with immersion, I, where I just was cracked and bleeding.
Jesus.
Yeah, I never got shot. So
Well, with that being said, Rabbi, sincerely, thanks for your service and welcome home. I know the first interview that we did, it's taken off some 34,000 views. Thousands of people have seen that, and your story's getting heard and it's being received well. And I just wanted to thank you for being willing to do this with me.
oh, I love it. I love it. It's my pleasure.
So I'm going to ask you a final question off the record, and then we can perhaps talk about that question in the next time. But sincerely, Rabbi, welcome home, my friend.
Thanks.